Greetings, everyone. We're going to start, because we're starting late, we're going to start. And let's see. Why don't I just start by introducing myself. I'm Matt Weiner. I'm an Associate Dean here in the Office of Religious Life here at Princeton University. A couple of announcements. We tend to make Buddhist announcements at Buddhist programs. So we have, here at Princeton, we have everyday meditation at 4:30 in Murray Dodge Hall on the 3rd floor. Buddhist students who come to that, raise your hands, just so people can see. We also have meditation every Thursday. Every Thursday at 12:30, we have a meditation and mindful eating that everyone is welcome to. Actually, also, right after this program, across the hall, in case you're interested, there's a Gita study group. The Hindu student group will be doing a Gita study. So that's just to kind of recognize that we do a lot of different kinds of things on campus. And when introducing great teachers, it's good to speak briefly and get out of the way and let the good teachers come up. So just to say a few things about Khenpo Rinpoche. He is the former vice rector of what I've been told is the largest Buddhist monastery in Tibet, which makes it one of the largest monasteries in the world. He's also the author of 100 books. I've heard 100 books. That's kind of a lot of books. He's also done a huge amount of service work in his career and developing service. And I think thinking about the relationship between running a monastery, educating students, and the relationship between that and service is something that we should attend to and listen to carefully when we hear from him tonight. Tonight he'll be talking about the Bodhisattva's path. And as many of you know, the Bodhisattva's path means being educated, studying, but also doing service, all of that together. So with no further ado, let's welcome our great Rinpoche here and welcome him, and please come.
Andrjiga girgin nabatantane lomatso nyam de jolan lojon cheji korkoshong de nam dang di lojon de ka ta nang chu de loma nabatang chaka jolan yin tane terang nyingong jin dane ta lopchan di girgin namba tane moz lojon dan the dernier loso korko tane yang tariga jolan shongnin tane kangstar yang dana gerlop sama ngoni na ji sama ko yang wo dan devjin de samlo goshi yon the ngoni na hajang tari lojon shiki korko zomboz tari shong song samjo sambati mo yoko.
Today has been a day of discussion concerning the subject of mind training and also Buddhism. Last night with some of the students when we arrived, and today for lunch with the educators here at Princeton. Very interesting discussions. And I found all of the teachers and students to be extremely relaxed and open-minded. And so this has been a great opportunity for me to learn, and thank you for inviting me to be here.
Na chu the shanshil sang we lam the shanzong choi chut the gesture laughter she ju dir kur parcher yansare the in na the da shi chu ko the khashang the chatsar mombo zu yonare the indi ngachigi shanzok da jikting lam go the chatsar zu da na the ni jikting di lamlen depi chu rakang thamo maimbi shorjinga tani chatsar mongbo yojire teyoni na ta terang namba 2 parchewa de tani nachula jimjik shimkan da nachula giyo pa tani mongbo yosare tena ngingoni na tani shorjing zu chi sagar go de ke namba la ngochu dibaz je.
Now our subject this evening is the path of the Bodhisattvas. And this is quite a far-reaching subject according to the Buddhist tradition. There are many ways to explain how to practice this subject. of training in the lifestyle of a bodhisattva, those who hold altruism as their principal goal. And so this can be explained, of course, how you engage in a worldly sense and how you engage from an uncommon approach. So it's been brought to my attention that there's a lot of interest in learning the traditional teachings for this type of training according to Buddhism, and so that is how I'm going to explain it this evening.
Tatani tangsang zambolanga tani majang ina majang tongshir danchi armara songje. Tati nanga tani parchir ta majang tongshir chikchi armanda tani chulu mambola tankan rezi to chame shaki yonje. Ta chulu la tani ina tani chulu tela 지 상계위 출력다 헌디 출력다는 롬그 출력 때라서비 출력량 하장 몽스 요건데 출력更요나양 파르치완도 달로 동처 연초거 로지 요차 되니 신속권 소위 저도 지 가르드근 잠만자 몽스가 명나양 다 로지가 결ım 저도 다른 콩 남비 르는데 마념 yapo yoyokinde ngasu jon chama lochong chama go teni samu jimoktan gosare.
So these days there are some 6 to 7 billion inhabitants on our planet, and it seems that for the most part a vast majority of them have a religious belief. Whether it is Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, whatever the case may be, whatever tradition it is. Those traditions are several thousands of years old and longer, and they involve the 5 sciences and other studies and aspects of learning which are crucial to the human development that have not diminished. And so this is something for especially the young people to take into consideration when they study and learn about the religions and decide what their own belief system is.
다 상제 출력 왕도 셴이나 그거 실나 출력되라 지 초가 잡은자도나 대신도 영 자르고 지 나촉바 그 추금 자르고 뭐 요늘에 요늘에 대덕 조조마 추거 냥돈도 말에 추거 냥돈 조도 tene rampan shanchip ko sim zikindu ngatsu noasan ji bag chulgina zo shamdang nyarji shanchip ko sim do zo sonje dan do songni na ngetena de zambolong chulg gangdang gangina chulg dayang gar kamare 대신 더 직딩 야럽 쇼파글 대 잠bolong 다 머르 소소단 겨급 소소라 잠잠 몽보스 연제다 대나양 다른 가르크 마레 상고요.
Now from the Buddhist perspective, in Buddhism we have of course many rituals in our traditions and many different special events and religious holidays and so forth. But are these the essential point of Buddhist practice? No. Actually, the essence of Buddhist practice is the cultivation of the bodhicitta, which means the awakened mind, the altruistic mind. And this means a mind of love and compassion. And so that is really the main emphasis of the path of Buddha Dharma. And from my perspective, I think that this will never contradict any other religious tradition. And not only that, it will always be in harmony with that which has to do with the cultivation of becoming a noble and decent human being who can contribute to the welfare of humanity from a worldly point of view.
tani chulig jamba choda jana ngatsu jikting ga sha jep kitana 대전的这个人给强盛个大这个大下瓦刚当刚那样的gar个三就的么个多吧有那的东国呢有那么的公嘛 nga che ge dirib chirgo wa nang go wo zomba bo chachna za hwachi rimbo che ge chsong je zena teni shangchu sen hui shotsir shina togo tariga jiktin shawa tariga mangar sonare tendi shangchu sen hui shotsir shina tari chudan jiktin shawa mangar zeki ti tari tsig sonje to chire zena togo ngomaga takba chenbu shangchip ko ta sen hui rotsir yang takban de shiji janzi yena teni 당선 그 잠보는 거 그거 직된 거 샤와 강당 강 있나 나추 다리 탁친 그 추당 르나바 근데 양나 가르크 요는 말이세요.
So according to our Buddhist tradition, then we consider very much the ramifications of how one's spiritual belief affects one's worldly life and the activities that one engages in, including one's family circle and beyond that. And so this kind of teaching about cultivating the altruistic mind is never going to oppose any of those aspects of life. And on the contrary, it is going to always be harmonious and beneficial. As one of our greatest masters, Za Patrul Rinpoche, said, for those who know and who have cultivated this altruistic mind, then that will always be harmonious with their worldly and spiritual endeavors. And so this is something that is always going to bring benefit, no matter what one is focusing on in terms of one's lifestyle.
양나 다리게 출력바 잠바즈 그냥 쿠디 출력바 마레 삼메다 ngchu 출력바다 출력바 마임바 몽즈 그 와르나 테스타바 다치 짱라 타바 치크치가 다리 잠보 하른 두르톤요 티모삼바 몽즈 요고데 또 되나게 야부 마레 삼거 체제제나 직된 그 차프트 그 왕도잖아 저머니 그 그거 라바더 가마니 다리 게르산데 그 따스타요 요고 마레 잠볼라나 시킨 야침보 쇼온데 데니 추원도시나요 나츠 추바 임바다네 추바 마임바 추바가 나나요 추바 소소그네나 하르소라 턴줄 머도이 nga teyin samir jamba po phara gba timur nambazina chu lugda manthambare.
And whoever the individual may be, it's having an attitude of separating oneself from someone else based on spiritual beliefs or really for any kind of reason is never going to be useful, but particularly in the name of a religion or a spiritual belief. Like, oh, I am following this Buddhist tradition, I'm awakened, and he is not, he's in a negative direction, or he or she are following the wrong path, and having these kinds of attitudes about creating divisions and polarities, then this is always going to undermine that which would otherwise be productive among human beings. For example, the East German Berlin Wall was brought down. And so when these kinds of blockages are eliminated, then there's an openness to communicate. And so particularly in the name of a spiritual view, to claim to be a practitioner of a particular religion, but then to say that another religion is not appropriate or acceptable, this can never be something that we should engage in, because this will always be anti-productive.
When Carson Sundi Yor Lopchan Jodi Kunabi Chul Natsuk Dekaka Sortaga Dimozanga Nansong. Then in this town, Chulik Mongo, then a Rangam Sortagaka. Then he Hajan Yore Samgo, Ninguni, Chulik Samala, Keep Gerdan, Sunjok, Division, and Flojoyan, Tari Shekio. Yenayang, nga, that now a Sanji Pare. Nga Sanji Baindi, Ni Sanji Bi, Chulik Nyamlin Shekionere, then a Tari Chulik Deana, the Janda Mangarvit Goganena, then a Flojon Sheonina, Ni Lingenje, then a Tari Samala and Drapkonje, then not Teranga, the Su Jargita, Tamu Mayamba, Taching, then a Shansim Gurkurka, then a Kirnambala. 다 그 샹칩 셈지기의 치모즈가 연 대다리가 모트 지기인.
When I was at Yale University, I was given the gift of this bracelet that's on my wrist, and it has the symbol of 13 world religions. And so I like this gift very much because I myself am working on the practice of course, learning other traditions and always respecting them because I understand what their belief system is in the truest sense. At the same time, I am a Buddhist practitioner. But if I am divisive or sectarian about other schools as a Buddhist, then that's my problem. That's not how it should be. And so that's why what I want to teach you tonight is the very essence or the heart of the Buddhist path, which is the nucleus of the Mahayana tradition, this cultivation of the altruistic mind. Because if this is cultivated, we can avoid any of these pitfalls.
다 네 마하야나 제르고난자가 또 타바 침본도 점탁 잔당 캬버그 쳐스기 아까잖아 쪼도 잔로와 심진 탐지 그 돈도 삼밥 샹침 쪽도 심기 탑나스기나 딤냥아다리 탁친 그 강석제너레 가티 티스타바 마탑나 드니 양다리 랑 찍버 타라 돈도 니르와다 랑그 쳔데 데모르키포 데진도는 지 리볼라 나차메 바다는 셈라 등거메 바 다 디문 종주의 체리나 양 점타가 남작다리가 소소래 대인이나 그 탁친 적은 느낌도 지금 가르저건데 니양은 지금 뭐지 오는 말에 그 랑것도나 못습니다 젠로아 셈치나 상록당도 뭐지 뭐가 쳤나야나 뭐시스요는 말 용신을 인데 옛나요 또 체리저건다 때네 탁친 그 르그저건나 탁바 침보 와서기도 된다스가 제가 용제.
And this cultivation of the altruistic mind, the bodhicitta, is the practice of Mahayana Buddhism, which means the greater vehicle or the great vehicle of Buddha Dharma. And what separates this from other systems or tenets is that the main emphasis is the thought or the wish to be of benefit to others, so that you're focusing on others more than yourself. And it's with that point of view that this altruistic mind can be cultivated. And so whoever does so will reap the benefits in this life of having less illness, physically and mentally. There'll be tremendous benefits because as soon as you de-emphasize the self and start emphasizing others, then your personal problems go away. And so there are many benefits such as this, as many people know who are practicing like this.
相处生活这个的起来在那，刚才刚我这个一呢，相处个生有呢，但题目是个样相处生活这个的。对于呢，相处个生这个的题目在那，等你求学个儿子相办公布，这个生计办那个严顿是的，样到做不上进度。这一单呢，等你心计把这个的人如果心情他们觉得样到把拉那没把做比上几个公平感，他们真偏比公平对头上呢，上就对待于三八这个样，等你想起个什么这个人。
Those who cultivate this bodhicitta are called bodhisattvas, and so that means the beings who sustain the awakened mind are the bodhisattvas because they have their mind is moist with this altruistic intention. And so Lord Maitreya Buddha made reference to this, and Ken Rinpoche gave the quote for that. And it means that precisely what was just said, those beings who are able to cultivate the bodhicitta now become of the ranks of the bodhisattvas who dedicate their life in service for the welfare of other beings.
너는 그 상기 생도 교자 타크 셔도네나 넘바 탐친 김바 시시 추 탐치장 까직마 제가 양덕버 신이 뜬자비 크바 첨보진 직된 그 감다나 요나 다 띠명아 다리가 드네 샹체 바제고너레 뜨인디 다 샹체 그 셈즈기도 셈친 요도쪽 셈친 몽즈다 semchin mo the tene ta jikten gar dengmar kan mai pa ga tes tawi tarim kheba chimbo the kirsona samgiwo chuma mayin ba rang nyang thakba ni gilla tes tawi senzu kiyo na tinya zegon.
Now Buddha means the state of omniscience. And in this state of omniscience, there is nothing that is not known. And so in that moment, and in each moment, instantaneously, all knowable things are realized in terms of their fundamental nature. That is the state of omniscience or full awakening as Buddha. And so, therefore, that is the full awakening of this altruistic intention. Because a bodhisattva who is aspiring to awaken or has otherwise awakened is dedicating his or her life to all sentient beings' alleviation of suffering. And this is done in a very heartfelt way. And so the notion is to not leave a single living being behind, to practice in this way so that all beings can be brought out of suffering.
Ta tangsang de nachu jimjig sheng yoni girgan da lo mangare ga shangchip ka semdang xianba dang nyangji de sembo soso shi ma shi da na ji changma chig yin nang zhe ge ga da da de norare shangchip ka semdang xianba de jin de na nyangji de de so da ri ga xianba da nyangji ni ga shangchip ka sem ge gire shangsim ge gire ta tedang jawa ga tangsang nga chu sanji ge chu jimjig shene chaki mamboz ge girganda lama yo bofte mamyo ma moz ga ka ta kan yen na rana shisha kan yen na girgin te mamyo na lama te mamyo no tene jimjig na ja ga chu de so tene yagboz ge da ri jonglik ngo yang shitap ge yo mare tena arnambatsu chi sanji bichulig na ja ga chulig ba jambatsu jimjig shene na lojong shene na tomar ti shuwa da chudel yoz shiniga girgin sani ba da yinrong bara tene zu tela tariga xapa dang tene te lojong shi jin na hajan yabore sambeyo.
These days there are many who think or claim that bodhicitta, love, and compassion, that these three qualities are the same. That there's really no difference. You can say that this altruistic mind means to have a loving intention or a compassionate intention. But that view is not exactly accurate, because love and compassion are root causes for the cultivation of bodhicitta. But once bodhicitta is cultivated, this is something that stands on its own. And also there are those who believe that this can be cultivated without relying upon a teacher to teach you how to do so, to just research it yourself. Well, this is also not correct, because in order to really come to know this bodhicitta, which is extremely profound and the essence of the path, then it's necessary to rely upon a qualified teacher who has cultivated this, and to rely for an extended period of time, and to train under him or her.
Tatari shangchip ka sem de la ye kizgina tani ngor ko ga yene na kanzop ko shangchip sem dana tondam gi tani shangchip sem zeidan namba ni onre ta tondam shangchip sem zigida chu tamchi ka nil to gare te nang so rankar ka so ke was ka gelar kir ko na hajan kamore kanzop ko shangchip sem zigide sayna ya tari ke sanare to keji od kanzop ko shangchip ko sem tela ya momba sem ke zigida jigba sem ke ni onre momba sem ke chezenere zena ta ne zonte nge semchin 탐치 그 돈접 삼기고 로 주면들 깨놓았더래. 지금 생각때 때 잠스도 삼누 마츠바가 또 무토거야나 랑가 칼라 강삼 그 샤와데 접주 고 삼누냐가 데네 다리가 돈덤 셈키 친구니 지금 생각때네. 거이나 nga 데네 로 삼기보다나 로 삼바자 마즈바가 데네 우스 다리 로위 람라 치노 따뜨 회제 그 샤요너래.
among the different distinctions for cultivating the bodhicitta, let's look at that by virtue of the nature. The nature is twofold. There are two distinctions. There is what is referred to as relative bodhicitta, and then genuine or absolute bodhicitta. In terms of this second category, the absolute bodhicitta, this has to do with realizing the fundamental nature of reality, which is difficult for an ordinary individual to comprehend just initially. This involves tremendous training, and so that's a higher category. But the relative bodhicitta is something that can be understood by everyone and can be cultivated. The bodhicitta can be cultivated through this level of understanding which is accessible to an ordinary person. And so in this category there are two inner distinctions, the aspirational bodhicitta and then the practical bodhicitta. The aspirational bodhicitta means to think within your mind, from this time onward, I'm going to dedicate myself to benefiting living beings in whatever way I can. That's going to be my aim. That's going to be my purpose. That is aspirational bodhicitta. And then practical bodhicitta means taking that wish and actually engaging it, putting it into action. So it'd be like, for example, I want to go to a particular destination. That would be the aspiration. And embarking on the path to arrive there would be the practical engagement.
Karti ta ngutsu hlomai nandra gergen nandra maon nirkamna tene ngoma ga shanchim chogda sim kit samkan timo yone na tene ta chigten sarji kirten da timo go chongne lana ya chore manna lama ge yin da timo gum de lana ya chomre zu rang semtone damja shirgonre damja chiri jende jena ngunggo dekshak tamchiji semke badang semchinji tun zapar tamje ba jende ngeyang daga mawana daga semching tun charti me ba go semching tun shi teni semching tun shi ji flapi ramba tela ramba jende yang ngeyang dari flapar sha samedana 다 랑 셈 같은 거네나 할레치 그 담자 담보 요네나 데네 존테 그 추 망라야 샹치 생화 제초레 데네 다리 추 셈그리 옙데나야 샹치기 셈 럼보체 제간도 교원도 다리 니마 데네 존테 데네 총요너레.
Now whether you are a student or a teacher, if you wish to cultivate this bodhicitta, the way to begin is to actually take the vow. It's called the bodhisattva vow, or the commitment, which you would do in front of a statue or an image of the Buddha, or in the presence of a master, a teacher. And then in their presence you would repeat the verses that basically mean that just as all the Tathagatas or Buddhas of the past have taken this vow and committed themselves to the path of benefiting others, so too shall I gradually train just like that in order to accomplish this altruistic intention just as they have done. And so you take the vow and make that a very firm commitment. And from the time that that commitment is made within your mind, then you become a bodhisattva, which was defined earlier, a being who has cultivated this altruistic mind. And definitely from that moment, once that vow is taken, then the bodhicitta takes birth in your stream of mind.
The shanchib ka sim kekita tene tamja tiso yang rongos da semchen yang mons ko tonje horna ameriki shenzhen ga tene xiao zhorandi de tene ku ju zo ga de hala ha hongbo jere da na de momong ko ton zhe da korang ga tamja she kan de wa ta te na lo che na lo ger yar mar lo je yar mar ta timoz ko ton da then Yarkovchik Semching Tondruzeki, Yarkovchik Mutamchik Tondruzeki. Then Shanchip go that is Sem Kiki Yenina, then a Titsuyan Hajan Rons Dana, Semching Hajan Monsre, the Yena and the Tamja, the Tamja that is Chonjons Mare, Tamja Hajan Chimbosre.
Now, when you take this Bodhisattva vow, it's something that is taken for a very long time, and it involves innumerable living beings. So it's not limited, as it were. For example, if you compare this to the oath of office that the president takes, or any such position where their hand is placed on the Bible, and then they raise their other hand, and then they take an oath. That's what I'm talking about, an oath, a commitment. But in the case of the president, that would be a 4-year commitment, and it's limited to a particular country and the inhabitants that live there. Now, conversely, the bodhicitta oath or vow is taken far beyond a limitation of several years, because it's taken until all beings are liberated, and so it includes all living beings, and so it's not just limited to a single country.
Ngama de American Lomazaga Tusong, then coaches in that Shanchip show the Sinkies either pay come on those. That Tendra was a maker to go, they get to Mendoze. That Unire, the Matsama Tendra that is simply going Ibaya Yomare, the Yenaya. Muchig Simki Madonaya, Mujamba Mezet Chonmare, Tansana, Pena, Wojid Norton, Wojid Dana, Dene, Rjana to Jepala Soba, Mons, the touching a chew in the Wandre. Garte touching a chew in Simki Gore, Sim Markina touching a chew son mare. Young Chuba Mons go touching a chuba in the Gore. Touching a chuba in Regina Shanchuk Simio Gorezema, Sim Mene, not touching a chuba Monzamia, Tokoyo Mare.
There was one student who said to me, this was in America, this bodhicitta, this is so difficult, having heard the description. How can I possibly do that? And this person just kind of gave up. I just can't do it. Well, from that point of view, it's actually true. Yes, it's very difficult. It is quite a lofty goal. However, just because one person can't, that doesn't mean that others cannot. So this is something that is entirely possible. It depends on each individual. However, if you're going to claim to be a practitioner of Mahayana Buddhism, then it is indispensable. You cannot be without this. What makes a Mahayanist is the cultivation of bodhicitta. So you can't claim to be practicing Mahayana Buddhism and to not have cultivated the bodhicitta.
The Mukang Wajikir Gidna, Shanchuk Sim de Kionena, then Natso Mutsama de la Gipkur Shigubadan, Torn of Shigubaz in the Jachimbo Javalazi, the Jagarka Hajan Kibachimbozre, Kunga Children Rezena, Gala Simki Tamba Renchente, Kibati Ishkala Shamser Loze, Mustan Sandrazina, da Kurungur Gidna. Then Shanchip Sim do you zonte, then a Kungayang de la Tarica, Shamtani in Zenere. That Kortawa Shamtani in Nina, then Jambasker Magubare, then Ninguni in Nara, Woma, Giampang Shanchip Simio Sagamudeso, Rigitiriona and Colata, Hian Tabani, Tapa, Dana Gava Tariga, Yo, Cherizena, Natsun Jitindana, Randu Yishik of Sambajan, Hajan Moyore, Yondreda, Ta Ran Lu, Tangedana, Tene, Rajan Kuna. Semchingo Tun Jufsamnoga, Timoga Mado, Hachang Komore, Tinatari, Zamolanga Musina, Tinjavi Tariga, Ta Jampanga Simdan Dambi Tarikanzanda, Netina, Hachang Komore Sambayo.
And whoever the individual is, this is another thing that's quite astonishing. Whoever the individual is, they have within their stream of mind this bodhicitta, which is already indwelling. It just needs to be cultivated. And so, therefore, it is as one of the greatest masters of this cultivation in our Buddhist tradition said, and I quote him, and his name was Shantideva. He said, whoever gives rise to the precious jewel of the mind, this bodhicitta, to that individual, I bow down. And so, really, if he is going to bow down to anyone who has cultivated the bodhicitta, do we need to mention how important this is? And that, in fact, whoever has cultivated this bodhicitta, you see, they become natural objects of respect in the face of others because they're unique. You can feel it. It's tangible. And so if there is someone whose mind is moist with altruism and true compassion, they're an individual that I will have faith in, that I will rejoice in. And the reason for this, of course, is as Shantideva said, if he's going to do it, then certainly I shall, and any of us should. There are so many people in the world who are busy wanting to accomplish their own purpose, to even discover their own wisdom nature, to become spiritual and so forth. But there are so few people who will actually dedicate their life to the welfare of others, who will actually exchange themselves for others. And that's what this practice is all about.
The Shanchip Sim the Gilabs Mani Zonte Shirna, Shanchip Sanku Lapa Hajam Moyonre, the Shanchip Sanku Domba Hajam Moyonre. Retana, Tedok Tamchit Sama Sarachi, Dijana, Simchan Jala, Nunsim Shitio, Ndo Savaga 200. To Ta Taching Chu, or Sava Yamba Mazan, Chungayan, the Sanji Bichul Sava Sonre. Ngoma Aryan Dewa tam Pagbal Hayans and Aryan Dewa Woma Jigavit Kabna Dorna Chuna Manseva Dejan Shaba Namji Song Zaidana that song Chirezena Dejan Shabi the Chujir Gomo Yatsujaton Yonjeta Tish Sava the Chirezena Mayan Nanjaga Mayan by Nanjaga Simchan Kandan Kayana Tela Tariga or Nunsim Mashikyo than Tela Tene Marsud Mashikyo Tandu Hajang Tari Karchias Gasonyore.
There are many ways to train in the cultivation of this bodhicitta. Once you take the vow, then you need to learn the way to train. But if I were to take this opportunity to just synthesize it all into the pith, it is to commit yourself to never harming any other living being intentionally. That right there is the root of the Mahayana path. That is the root of the Buddhist teachings. For it is as the great 12th century saint Aryadeva said, quote, all the Tathagatas, or Buddhas, have said, the Dharma in brief means to never harm any living creature, end of quote. So the Dharma, Buddha Dharma means 84,000 categories of teachings. And so the pith of these teachings is to never harm another living creature, whether they are human or non-human. It simply doesn't matter. You will never harm them for any reason.
Ta jang semchen jalan tsewa mo shi yondo sangi bi chulig mayen baga jamba ga chu cha chu mo yonre horna khasang ande yeone tene rikshit baga tene lobma parchir mbon ba no yo sare to khungdang kacha shongdi chire zenena to muzena khuchung go tari ga chulig di tsawan so tari chimi semi jiwilam ndo yenzeng Kongsu semchen jan dari mentsi vishirdono tani the salam boyodna yang dari ga chokchar na marese te mayen baga huirna rejun de khaship ko ne dana to khano bum ro iche tan tenra zone reze tani jindagang semchen jan maksoba te tawi dari ga tani chamtha yonre ta teso inna yang ngaso go mo thamchik yang semchen jan Mosutio Timogo Tasha Drugona Carcetera Hajang Skamo in Retana, then Asu Taba Chimbo Chu in Nandraga, Jambaga Chuli in the Kirondi, T Nandun Sand, Kanajiga Sonyo, Tame, Sanluton Gosario Samgo.
On this subject of not harming any other living being, this is not just only common to Mahayana Buddhism, but we find this aspiration and practice in other traditions. For instance, when I was in Yale, I met several PhDs of the Jain tradition, and they were explaining to me that the principal teaching of that tradition is nonviolence, and that the discipline is to never kill or harm any living being, even the tiniest insect that may be on the path where you're walking. And that they will even cover their mouth with some kind of cloth in order to not harm the beings if they were to come in your mouth or whatever the case. And so this non-Buddhist tradition is also adhering to this philosophy and this truth of nonviolence and the protection of beings rather than harming them. And these days, this is something that we really have to take into consideration because the harming of others is rampant. And so all the more reason why this doctrine of the Mahayana tradition needs to spread and it needs to be fully understood.
Shana chuzikindo tani tambo jongluk tani yahaz kurkoga tani warda rang te samu mbuton tani tartu tsoi chot nyamlen shikyo ta hajang kar chewore ta tangsan garegina tambo jimjig dan thuba lojong mede takar ke nyamslen jok te korsa chembozre yang garegina nyamlen chi am shide rang su ji ike mombo zo lo dana ta tu tani ji na chu te ko yom dog dana na chu ge ton to yom dog na ba mong tong ge ta te yang da re nyen kha ajang chewore chire zena nga chu shisha kang dang kang yin na yang zu lojong da laglen nikar go gre zema ka te ya chan jo ji chan zi na ti zhuwa ro ji ta jin de myong go ne na hajang ka mo yin re.
Generally, when we're learning the Dharma, and of course that means this cultivation of bodhicitta, in this case, it's very important to engage in academic study, which is systematic. And that means at first you study, you contemplate, and then you establish your view and you put that into practice. You bring that into daily life as how you live your life. And so these days we find people who are basically not informed trying to practice something that they really don't know about. That's not the way to approach. And likewise, it's not the way to approach to read many books about a subject so as to become informed, but then to not really contemplate and internalize and bring that into one's actual living experience. That can be dangerous. And so it's necessary to bring both of these aspects together, academic study and practical daily life application. And if we try to separate them, this is always going to be problematic.
Tani kechak to tsogo dari kemende ta oyok to korwagam ngaksu shepagam chamchu shepa ta timo mo chek yore ina yo tangsang ge de namba di kchi sik dari njer yonje ji parchir ramnyam go namba ro to go yonje ina yo kasu deren ge ta mu dang na tunju go war go tani ramnyam maim ba te la hajang dari ge tani 차브르침보 송용제 또이나 르남바 근데 때 던조소 종급 고제나 양까모레다 닌데니 창마라 그 보르크시기의 체인제나 마옹와라 디 셈친 냠 탁바다 던조 데소 담치다요 ngci 그 다직 셈녀지 그 막수기다나 르둥 먹다기 디모가 타다 촌을 실고가.
And as you all well know, there's a history of hierarchy, human beings who are in a higher position, torturing and mistreating those whom they thought were beneath them, the whole process of slavery and so forth. For the most part, in many regions of the world, this kind of conduct has been eliminated. And there's been a real sense of equality that's emerging among human beings. However, the relationship between the human being and animals is still in a dilemma in terms of this lack of equality when it comes to the treatment of animals by human beings. And so it's not necessarily the case where I'm saying, for example, you need to protect the animals, although that's a good idea. It starts by thinking that having the attitude and the awareness that towards those weaker sentient beings, particularly animals, one should try to cultivate more thoughts of loving kindness and compassion, and especially decide and dedicate oneself to not be involved in the killing of them or the torturing of them.
America de Zombabo Churchen Kensan de Sing Sangez Jindoa Ku Ta Parcher Duncha Tongilo Tani Nobel Arker Zomrik Shagatonare Ku Namterdingi Jinder Stario Kundina Chazionjena Mur Nirji me Patazola the Jikten Shipapol Hag Tijikuna Hajang Tari Kamuyan Sayaka Dazend Chidare Teni Nisi Taginina Ta Natsu Tariga Semchen Janda Marsu Shi Danati Hachagla Rurjandoyang Kani Jangdendana Kani Jirde Zirgonena Tati Hajang good to Unisikeras Rezendo.
On this subject, I've had an opportunity to study some of the writings of one great Western thinker, in fact, the laureate of the Nobel Prize of Literature in the year of 1978, and his name was Isaac B. Singer. He was a Polish Jew, and he really honed in on the subject that I'm bringing up just now, because from the first point of view, he mentioned in his preface for one of his well-known books, he mentions, how can we pray to God for mercy if we ourselves have no mercy? And he follows that up by saying, how can we speak of righteousness and justice if we take an innocent creature and shed its blood?
다른 쿠티 텝스기오레 티 텝팀냐가 그 자우 세동거 다 로리지세르코나 남터제 키티모즈레 티나나 치제온제나 나츠 머남기 tene jan tandro la sobala narchu shekiwondo tene lache mogo tene morjan la to narchu shekidon chabrmend tzeaka to kungunguni na to khamazanyendo detang chekenze detang chedena ko rang detang ched mayen to semchen jamba zu detang cheyenze to kungena ta tari karzeran gwa to karzeran gwa kyang to kerionje.
And in one of his famous books called Enemies, A Love Story, he mentions in there, in their behavior toward creatures, all men were Nazis. And so this great thinker who won the prize, he said, I did not abstain from meat eating for the reasons of my health, but for the health of the animals, or the chickens, literally. So he became a vegetarian based on these reasons, which was quite unique at that period of time.
Huena American Stunzen Mamboyena, Lalago, Detang Cheta Hamazanata, Lalagan Kuri Chonchu Cheta and Hamazana Yonje. They don't have a jungle, Girganda, Homatsunanayan, Tene Chigala, Nyangji, Mugunena, then a Semchen Janka Cestola, no Bayakusame, the Hamazanada, then Ramanda Mumbos Yokionje. Then the Tsumuina, Moma. Nambakundung cheki tsama khamaza zergona ta thomani ne churjin zu chayonje te indi diz kanaya thangdana yinaya khazana de suji ta semching ge chechogla samno tangne sha jenyon shinro wa tangna yanaya ji titsut dari ge dawa re ge na tene ji ta ni mak chi da ni ge war da ji mazaji yinaya girni tene ngatsu nyezerna yodno sikolandi stana yoni the tandru momboz ke chechongda ndor margoji ramji tela tare kepen yoko nonde samnotan gosare.
Now, these days, of course, there are many reasons. There are many reasons why people abstain from meat eating and become vegetarian. Even among our American presidents, there are those who have become vegetarian primarily for health reasons, and those who become vegetarian in order to ease the environment, and so for environmental reasons. And then, of course, there is the reason that's based upon compassion, as I just mentioned in the case of Isaac Singer. And so all of these are valid reasons, that's for sure, for becoming a vegetarian. But among them all, the notion of compassion can really sustain this endeavor. Because if one has been a carnivore and then just cuts that off, there may be the concern that this could affect one's health. But if you keep in mind that this is directly contributing to the welfare of the living creatures, then it becomes something more accessible. And so you could begin by lessening your intake of meat. For example, in 1 month, just abstaining from meat eating for a day or two, and really trying to think about the welfare of all living creatures on this planet, that we're all here under the same sky and receiving warmth from the same sun. And if you use the purpose of compassion, then it's probably going to also meet the needs of health and environment.
한도양 저 추바 코나가 제출즈레사 마닝가 치레제나 롭잔디 왕도시나 tani tsarik lakshar hajang thombo ta tangsanina tsarik lakshar thombo hoina haver lopcha chimbo dana tani tari khabrame bartawa kirionje teindi tsarik chunje papo hoina ain stan tabala khir namba tari hajang sangje lejang tari tapa chiyore ta terang shiro ngai na yo hajang gapcho chesong tenendi ain stan kongo tarnga lopcha nyongsaga dana tari chi lopkan re dimotso thamche tar tapkura songni ta ngi ti ne kamna samlo tana hoina tsarik ba khung rzin jana matse giram go chotna tene chi semchina nyangje zer ko na jaga karze ndsu tada ta samlo tong nyon zre.
And also the university where we presently are, this Princeton, and the other wonderful universities I've had an opportunity to visit, such as Harvard and so forth, are exceptional institutions for learning, and particularly in the category of science. Having come to know that this is the very place where Albert Einstein lived and passed, and having had an opportunity to study his life story myself, I've always been highly inspired by him, and so I was happy to learn more about Princeton and be here and see some places where he actually was. And it's interesting to take note of the fact that for the first 30 years of his life, he was very much a deep thinker about this subject. He said, quote, "Although I've been prevented by outward circumstances from observing a strictly vegetarian diet, I've long been an adherent to the cause in principle. Besides agreeing with the aims of vegetarianism for aesthetic and moral reasons, it's my view that a vegetarian manner of living, by its purely physical effect on the human temperament, would most beneficially influence the lot of mankind."
다 니체제레잖아 아이스탄가 공고 멋세고 여름고 초대나 파츠 지르고 숨쳐 담발로니 또 공고 떠진다 치레제나 코 따타니 또 खामजातिको तनी खोरी को कंगने न तेस्ता और मंदसे यनायो कर्जे वाला याचा को कर्जे वाला को तारी कैप्चर उनका योसे तो गोष्ठी के छिकारे जना मीम जिशु करता वा तमा तेजन दन कंशु को यारदा ताखा मजाति कर्जे द योंगा माज तनी तारी रंग लिपु देथां दाना तो खिका तो ता यारथुन यो पाला खेपन ज्याछिम बो याकजे थां ताउ ने कमना तक्सोंद Then Tang Warwin Nirkamna, then Kuhaza get the Semnona demo Mundze. 다 파르치르 그 로 어즈그랑아 되네 하 제뇽서 송원네 되네 타마다리가 다 파르치르다리 아인스탄드네 직된 파로든 루람비네 금나 콩르 장아스르기 딱 지금 앞진 가는 걸로 인사리 뛰어내 금나 쿠치젠데잖아 쿠 쪽보스가 이게 그나나 다 이게 그나나 쿠 다르다다리가 던로 하양사금에 수양사금에 대신도 냐라서 바양 지양사금에 이나 쿠 리포 대탕요 Natsun Rua Mazen, the Kini Namon Zonte, the Ne Tariga, Semching Haza, the Makir Natari Yakare, Zidana, Kuti Sigdetari, Ni Namian Tariga, some of Tangayo.
And so, as just mentioned, and then the quote from his own speech, for the first 30 years of his life, he was definitely an advocate of vegetarianism. However, he mentions in other writings that are clearly documented in his archives that he himself was not able to give up meat eating due to circumstances during this time. Although he definitely felt it was a good idea, even for his personal health, but his reasons were really based on an altruistic attitude and also the general environment. And so he said that I've always eaten meat with a guilty conscience. And finally, when it came close to the time of his death, for the last year of his life, he was able to become a vegetarian. And in his writings, it goes on to state, I'm living without fats, without meat, without fish, but I'm feeling quite well this way. It always seems to me that man was not born to be a carnivore. And so that was his view, and he thought it would be better if from the time of birth, man were to just be a vegetarian from the start.
How's that sound good way?
Do you want to have meat?
다 있나요? 지레세나 맞수 당선 거 만다나 대신도 참여가 원도 시나요? 딱 지주나 가자나 되네 리볼라 낫 빼먹어서도 되게 용조 시원데 얘는 디코랑에 다가야 이게 뭐뭐 좀 용하다나 다 대나 뒤쪽거 원거 대 잠수 막 똑다리게 지기면.
However, this is quite a broad subject, obviously. Scientifically and also medically, there are many arguments and pros and cons for vegetarianism versus meat eating. I myself have written books on the subject, which I won't have time to get into here today, but I've given you the main points of my view.
Shanship ki lamda tsoi chota chester shogonina snyarji kona gongon snyarji sanji chondun degam do kana chu mambo labra mashate chikona labra shawo chide kanjena snyarji chembo wo.
And as I mentioned, to reiterate, the path of the Bodhisattva is all about altruism or compassion for living beings. That is the pith point. The Buddha Shakyamuni in the sutras has reminded us again and again, if there is one thing to train in on the path of Dharma, it is to train in compassion.
Ta jigdak sardina tani jang chu nangchu shaptur yin nanjaga mani kharsan teran jikting yarab shopa gewa dana shawa zombo moz manjap chi chance innayo tani zakhachu rumbo chi tsu song je nge te kir namba la tari jigdong ko sartam bi chize onje jena ta lojong rang lojong shi xiangchi tsemgi rang lojong na ling gewa nachchi manjap kyang rangjin doni bamel thingjin jap tak song je ti nangdon chire jena samba zong dana xiangchi ko sem ndoi hazu de jang ji jang na ligu je gewa mambo manjap nan jaga ngakha gewa mambo manjap na yang jaga rang samba zong de yong jang rang do yong de gan jam nare yang do yong de gan jam nare ta tak song je de na namba su rin dong gan choi chot de no de ne jana nyang ji gom ji dana samba ya han zeng jin de rang da jan ni ge dong zhe xi ge de ni ji tamo ma yin ba yin ji ri sam ji nga la yang de ge nyang kong ri bi tang ne yi qi yo ga zhen qi.
So to conclude my speech, In Buddhism, of course, the notion is to accumulate virtue, to be of benefit. But since the single most beneficial thing is the cultivation of the bodhicitta, let's take into consideration the speech again of Zapatra Rinpoche, one of our greatest Nyingma masters, who said, train the mind, train your own mind. If you train your mind with bodhicitta, even if you are unable to accomplish a single virtue through body and speech, you will accomplish the aim of self and others effortlessly. So the point is that just by having a noble, good and kind heart with positive wishes and thoughts to be of benefit to others and to train your mind in this way continuously, you are not only going to accomplish the welfare of yourself, but you are going to accomplish the welfare of others. And that means you don't need to do many other things, because that is the single most important point that accomplishes everything with one focus. And so, since this is the extraordinary capacity of this path that I've had an opportunity to share with you, I have every wish, and I also believe that you'll be able to do this and connect with this, and so I offer these instructions to you from the depths of my heart.
Thank you so much, Rinpoche. And before I forget, let's also thank our translators, Sangye and Lama Chodam, for incredible translation.